I was 5 years old, standing up in the front seat of my grandfather's car. This is back before the turn of the century, back before seatbelts. And he hit the brakes. All of a sudden, his arm flew out across the seat to hold me back. To keep me from falling. That is the first memory I have of my grandfather Lane. Arm outstretched, hand open wide, ready to help at a moment's notice. And it's also the memory I have of him that flashed across my mind when I was told by phone that he passed away. From the age of 5 up through the day before my 26th birthday when he was buried, I had a good 21 years of memories, learning, listening, living around the man. And now it's been another 21 years since I last had a conversation with him. But the memories I have of those first 21 years, I hope have helped me through my life and work over the last 21. Every book I write, every short story, every article, every screenplay I've written for myself and for folks that you all have heard of over the years, there's a little bit of me in there, but there's just a whole lot of G.W. Lane. Why not? He said it best, why reinvent the wheel? He loved to pass it on. He loved to give young ministers his sermons. He got a kick at it. Matter of fact, I think he put together the Lane line just so he would have an excuse to do that. And over the last few years, we've had this kind of long-distance correspondence. But in the truest sense of the word, we only collaborated once, face-to-face. It was not long before he passed. I was working on a little story called A Path of Your Own, and I was having a little trouble with it. He says, well, sit down, tell me about it. I said, well, it's about a little boy overhearing a conversation between his father and his grandfather. They're in the front yard of their farm, and the old man is about to take his nightly walk. And the father says to the old man, Dad, let me walk with you tonight. You always walk by yourself. He says, not tonight, son, not tonight. When you were a boy, I'll let you come along, but you're a man now. It's time you found a path of your own. The little boy overhearing the conversation is intrigued by this. Where does grandfather go every night? What's so interesting about that winding river trail? So he decides to follow. Shadowing his grandfather, he hides behind a tree and ducks behind a bush and kind of watches him as he goes down the path. But then he gets to thinking, this is just an old man's way of passing time, and he starts to leave. But just as he turns to go back home, the wind begins to pick up. The breeze becomes a tree-wrestling howl, and the light fills the forest. He wraps his little arms around a tree to keep from being blown away, and he yells into the wind, Grandpa! The wind dies, and he hears two men talking, laughing, old buddies. One of them is Grandpa, the other man he doesn't know. Inching up, he eavesdrops on the conversation. It's a lofty conversation, talking about things he has no understanding of. When I told my grandfather about this, he got this big smile on his face. He scooted up in his chair and he pointed at me with that big old hand of his. And he said, I think I know where you're going with this. He said, somewhere in the conversation, half a stranger say to the old man, you're closer to my house now than you are to yours. Come home with me. Well, he made it work. His contribution made my little spin on the story of Enoch really fly. That little story has been published 10 or 12 times over the years. He could string together words that you could actually see. You could talk about it driving a nail into a wall, and he'd make a sermon out of it. He could talk about an old man, a little old woman, and a little about to fall down house, and how they built a room onto the end of that house, and turn it around to you joining your house to the house of God.
Yeah.
He could take a 3-letter word, yet. Yet. And with that one syllable, he could give you more hope and faith than you could find in any one place at any time. Though the skin worms devour this body, that should be the end. Yet. That means something more is coming. And for G.W. Lane, there was always something over the hill, around the bend. He never wavered off his path. He never looked back behind him too often. He wanted to see what was ahead, reaching for that light at the end of the road. There's going to be a plaque out here on the wall that has the dates born, the dates died, as it does with all the plaques, as it will for each of our tombstones. That's the boundaries that God sets for our life. And for my grandfather's life, that path was only 70 years and 4 months long. Not a lot of time, but he made every moment of it count. He did enough, and then some. And on that journey, he may not look back a lot, he may not have wavered off his path, but he did pause on occasion for each one of us here. Just to say, just came by to tell you. And I'm a very fortunate fellow that I was able to spend a little bit of that time with him. Arms outstretched, ever ready to lend a hand at a moment's notice. When I was working on that story those years ago, The Path of Your Own, I didn't realize it till recently, but that became a metaphor of our relationship. I was that little boy, my grandson, shadowing my grandfather along his path, eavesdropping on his conversations with God. And like the little boy in the story, all too soon my grandfather was gone, having accepted that ultimate invitation to come home. Each of us here have a path of our own. Some of us may call it an avenue, some may have this called a boulevard. Some of you out here may even call it a parkway. I call it a lane. He just came by to tell you that's how he always began. That he'd rub his legs, he'd shake his fist, and talk of God's redemption plan. His words were always simple and painted pictures that seemed so real you could reach out with that little one in the master's garment. You could feel. Little children would smile and take notice of Mr. Noah and his ark, and the old would be inspired by Joe's second start. When it came time to sing, he could be heard above the rest. And though he thought others were better, the bishop was the best. He never spoke ill of anyone, and when wronged, he always forgave. He never cared much for competition, only that souls were saved. He was the son, the brother, the husband, the father of a very special few, but he became a part of every family. Every family. He ministered to. But to me, he was simply Papa, my grandpa, my friend. And I could find no better role model if I searched the time's end. For a generation now, his frame is laid under earthly sod. But though the skin worms have devoured this body, yet he is remembered. Yet he is loved. And his words will live on.